Friends, you might hear me stumbling over my words a little bit more. You might hear me, maybe not putting my sentences together as cogently. And to be honest, y'all, I'm tired. I have not slept well, honestly, probably in the last week. I find myself worn out by everything that's going on. And I wonder if you are too. I wonder if you're tired. And if you are, it's okay. We can be tired together today. Just know I might trip over my words a little bit more than I usually do. I did have a moment, though, that I had a chance to be uplifted, where this week I had a chance to participate, along with some other members of Old Stone, in a vigil to mark the loss of George Floyd and to grieve many, far too many other deaths that happen far too often. And I'll be honest, if any of you had a chance to watch the video that I made or had a chance to watch it on the news or were there, it was a beautiful, peaceful moment. I think for many, even folks who were sitting in restaurants and watching what was happening, it was a balm to a lot of souls who have grown wary of this time. How could you not feel tired? I mean, seriously. I often hear, and I don't know if you hear, the same refrain over and over from Langston Hughes' poem called Tired, and it reverberates in our hearts. I'm so tired, aren't you? For the world to be good and beautiful and kind. And I felt like for a moment that this week we had a chance to show the world that a vigil could be good and beautiful and kind. And I know as I watched the feeds of folks on Facebook that many of you were very proud and pleased to see that in our fair town we had a vigil that was safe, that didn't have any issues to it. And part of what's so interesting is that what we end up doing is we celebrate what we're doing in part as a comparison and a reference to what else is going on in the world right now. And indeed, as pictures kept coming in and I would watch reporter live feeds on 10 TV and other places, we were watching eruptions all over the country and even in Columbus. Many of you, I'm sure, were watching the news, watching where you work with a certain amount of dismay and maybe some anxiety as you watched what was going on. I watched a battle over and over again between armed police on one side and protesters on the other, a constant give and take and back and forth. One line would push and the other would retreat, and then the other line would push and the other would retreat. I saw people perpetrating violence against each other. I watched bottles get thrown at police and police fire rubber bullets and wooden bullets back at the protesters. Over and over again, I witnessed this violence and it wore me out like I imagine it wore you out. And then over time, they happened. Little fires everywhere. Now, of course, this wasn't the intent of my title when I figured it out earlier this week. This is really more to be a Pentecost story, but this little fires everywhere all of a sudden seems a bit more appropriate given what's happened in the last week. And of course, now we watch these riots and we witness what's going on, and we see where our minds begin to wander. Not as much to the issues of systemic racism that have been a part of this country's history from its very inception, but instead we move our energies to criticize those who are protesting. And even now with reports that we are gathering, that we are finding out that there are white supremacist groups that are coming in out of town and are fomenting even further chaos. Not the original protesters, but other folks were beginning to get that. We have this tendency at times to dismiss these issues altogether. Our energies start to move towards denouncing riots over racism. This was a post I would see on Facebook multiple times this week. I'll give you a moment to read it. It seems so often we can start with the just thing, but then when things start to become difficult, we orient our minds towards other things. Well, I was glad that Delaware did such a good job because at least they're not like the other folks. Those folks have ruined their sense of justice for this world. We were on your side until you screwed up. So on a Pentecost Sunday, when we are confronted with the violent roaring of the Spirit coming upon the believers in the first part of Acts, I have wondered this week if the little fires everywhere might be used by the Holy Spirit to remind God's people about the work of justice. Friends, this week, the thought of breathing has come very close to my heart. I thought about what would happen if I couldn't breathe. If for some reason something happened to me that I no longer could feel the air go through my lungs, and if I wasn't pinned down like George Floyd, I might be apt to thrash around. I might be apt to do everything I could to ensure that I had fresh air to breathe again, because without it, I would die. I wouldn't probably be all too worried about what I might break or what I might destroy, because I am trying to get the one thing that will allow me to survive. And for too many of our brothers and sisters that we are united in faith who are of color, they are living a life where too often they are forced to only inhale minimal gasps to keep themselves alive. Indeed, no child should ever have to be told, hands up, don't shoot in this country. But yet parents are gasping at breath in order to be able to hope that their child survives through the day. And when you consider, friends, that this current COVID crisis is 2 times as likely to affect people of color, and on top of that, to see 3 major incidents of violence in the last few weeks, you can start to feel choked for air. So it shouldn't surprise us that people are fighting back in desperation. Of course, some of this, again, is perpetrated by people who are using this opportunity to seed chaos in this world, and we should condemn that as often as we possibly can. But friends, that's not the whole story. This picture came up this week out of Minneapolis. It was the looting of a Target. And of course, the first thing we can say is, once again, here are people who are too busy protesting, too busy looting to actually hit the point. But look for a moment at what's in that shopping cart. It's a child's car seat. A child's car seat. What person seeking to strike chaos in the heart of this world decides to steal a car seat for a child? What people who are hoping to foment injustice in this world decide to pick up food so they can care for their families? Friends, if our displeasure and sensibilities are more offended by looting than by a world that preferences the success of certain people simply because of the color of their skin, then these little fires are the Spirit's reminder that there must be justice in this world. Let me say that again. If our sensibilities are more offended by looting than by a world that preferences the success of certain people simply because of their skin color, then these little fires everywhere are the Spirit's reminder of the need for justice. And friends, it honestly shouldn't surprise us that Delaware had no violence whatsoever. Take a look at these 2 maps. One of these you've seen before when I've preached about the issues of wealth in Delaware County. You can see on what I see as my left-hand side, the darker map, These are indications of low-income census tracts in Delaware County and Franklin County. What that means is there is a good proportion of a census tract that lives at 60% of the area median income. So in other words, they're relatively poor. In the entire county of Delaware, there is one census tract that qualifies as low income. Look to our south and see how many there are. And contrast that to the map on the right, that each color indicates the population based on race of different communities. And isn't it striking to you that somehow it seems to overlap, that the places where there are more people of color are also the places that have greater poverty? It's also striking that Delaware is very much the same color. Friends, we are wealthy. And we are generally homogenous as a society. We can look generally the same. We act generally the same. And generally, we are stable financially. We feel safe here. And what isn't safe, friends, can simply be pushed into one census tract in one corner of town, out of sight, out of mind. This is privilege. This is privilege. Now, privilege does not have to be a bad thing on its own. It allows us to go places and do things others can't. The resources God has blessed us with enable us to go care for folks in ways that folks who are working every single day of their life, trying to stay ahead of this roaring destruction behind them, it allows us to stand in front and say, let us take care of you. We can use our privilege for the benefit of those who are struggling. But when it's used to take care of ourselves and in spite of the other, then it perpetuates systems that only value certain people over others. And when we do that, we invite the air for those individuals in those areas to become more thin and cause it to be more difficult to breathe. Friends, these little fires that are around us might very well be the Spirit's reminder of justice, and that what we have been given, God calls us to give away to care for the least of these, those who are oppressed, those who are vulnerable. So how do we move forward in a time like this? Well, I wonder what it would be like for us to hold our own fires of the Spirit. To take this time as something not to ignore, not to push away, not to dismiss as saying, well, shame on them for causing damage to things that are insured, that will be fixed. Instead of focusing on all the wrong, what do we work on to make things better? To proclaim that we really believe thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it's not just something that we conveniently say on Sunday mornings because it's what we've always done. It means, friends, to be willing to do the work of the last half of Hughes's poem. We like the first half, I'm so tired, aren't you, for the world to be good and beautiful and kind. But Hughes continues and he says, let us take a knife and cut the world in two and see what worms are eating at the rind. This is not a call to violence. That would be far too convenient to dismiss this poem as a call to violence. Instead, it is a willingness to take apart the fabric of the way things are to expose what truly is destroying us. And listen, it may mean ridicule. The onlookers' first reaction to Pentecost wasn't shock or surprise or amazement. Yeah, there were some folks. But certainly, Luke decides to tell us that there were a group of folks who were deriding the people at Pentecost. Clearly, these folks are drunk. When we open up the world to see its brokenness and we work to remove the worms for the benefit of peace and justice for all, it's going to be hard work. People won't be happy. There may be some of you right now hearing this sermon and not happy now. If you aren't, email me, pastor@oldstone.org, and let's chat. Don't hold that anger in. But we don't have to start tomorrow. To really reorient our lives, to think about justice, to look at what is happening in this world right now is not something that you figure out overnight. It's not a program that you pick up and do. It's not a mission trip someplace that helps you see something, but then you get to go back to the convenience of your own home. It is an entire new way of thinking about the way that the world works. And I think that might just be the way that the people who were at the first Pentecost had to change their lives as well once the Spirit came upon them and they saw what God could do still in their lives. Friends, what would it look like for us as a congregation, for us as a portion of a congregation, to study and to understand the deep systemic issues that are at play? What would it be like if we really learned to listen to the person who is shouting out in anguish that the world is not working for them, that it is not safe for them, that they cannot go out of their own homes without feeling like somebody will attack them? What is it like to really listen? What if, brothers and sisters, we were the little fires that prodded other church-going, God-loving people in Delaware County to do something more? What if you were the little fire for somebody else? What if you were the Spirit for somebody else? And what if this time wasn't just one more opportunity to create division with those who are struggling? What would it be like to care for the father who has to steal a car seat in order to care for his children? This next month, we're going to think about this together. The sermon series is called Thy Kingdom Come Before We're Done. And so this June, we're going to take some time together as a community to wrestle with, before we're back to opening up things a little bit more, and we may have some outdoor services together, and we may see each other, but we're still caught in a time where we have to sit and think a lot more than we're comfortable with. What is it like to imagine that the words, Thy Kingdom Come, might actually mean something, and that you have a part in that? Once we've had a chance to think about that, and you've had a chance to figure out, are you ready to walk through these issues? We're also going to look at a book together starting in July. One of my professors from Austin, Carolyn Helsel, wrote this great book called Anxious to Talk About It. And it's a book to help white Christians talk faithfully about racism. It's a small book. I have it right here. It's not very big size. It's about, 126 pages. If you're sitting right now and you're scared, if you're sitting right now and you're angry, if you're sitting right now and you're ready to do something, then sign up and walk through this book with me. Let's actually start figuring out what it means to tell this story well. What is it like to do more than just click our tongues because somebody did some rioting somewhere? What is it like to talk faithfully about systemic racism? And y'all, the other thing is, we do have the deacons offering next week. What a way to start right now caring for those who need and who have not enough to care for themselves than to give fully to the deacon's offering next week. Every single dollar that goes into the deacon's account goes out to do pastoral care. Do you know how many grocery store gift certificates the deacons give to people who call here because they don't have enough food? Too many, but they do it. Give so that people can be cared for. That, in its own way, will move the needle towards justice just a little bit. But friends, if there's one thing I can leave with you, let these coming weeks be a chance to be prodded. Let these coming weeks be a chance to reflect, to ask hard questions, to be angry, to be hurt, to not understand and want to seek to understand. Call me, please,